So content, I'm super into content. What do I think about more than anything else as a content marketer? Buyer personas, for sure. Everything that I do, everything that our company does is based on making sure that we're reaching the right people. And having really strong buyer personas is an important part of doing that. So, what is a buyer persona? Brian wasn't sure exactly the level of familiarity with the topic, so like he mentioned, it's going to be pretty kind of base level, but then we're going to build from there. Happy to answer any questions that you have. But the Buyer Persona Institute is a great resource for information about buyer personas, and they explain that a buyer persona tells you what your prospective customers are thinking and doing as they weigh their options to address the problem that your company solves. So it's really thinking into, what is actually going on in your prospect's head, what are the behaviors that they're taking part in as they're going through the whole buying process. So then the buyer persona, in terms of what it actually is and how you actually use it, is a semi-fictional representation of your ideal customer. You base it on market research as well as data about your existing customers. So semi-fictional is important here. You want to base it on real people, but the representation shouldn't be any one person. Like, it shouldn't be like, oh, that's Dan from IT. Like, you don't want to actually know who you're working with. You want to just be able to relate to them, empathize with them, base them on a real person, but have it broad enough that it could apply to any potential customer. So why do we care about buyer personas? Personas are really important when you're developing your positioning and your messaging. You need to know that the words that you're using are the words that are going to resonate with your audience. You need to know that when you're talking to the IT prospect, they want to learn about a certain topic, whereas if you're talking to the sales prospect, they want to learn about something totally different. So for your positioning and messaging, super important. Guiding content creation, I mentioned I'm a content marketer, so the content that I create is geared toward a specific persona. You all know that there's so much more content out in the world than anyone could ever possibly consume, ever. So in order to have any chance of breaking through the noise and reaching the right person at the right time, it should be targeted directly to them. They should say, oh, that's IT marketing for dummies, that's for me, like I'm a dummy, whatever you want them to say. And then you can also nurture your leads and your prospects more effectively if you're targeting the right persona. I'm not sure how many people here are using any kind of marketing automation or lead nurturing process, but it's basically continuing to communicate with the prospect as they move through their buying process. You can do that much more effectively if you know what their buying process looks like. So you can map it out in advance through your buyer personas and make sure that they get to the goal that you're looking for. Then once they get to that goal, which ideally for most of us I think is a sales conversation, you can facilitate that conversation with targeted information about what that person cares about at that stage. So this is a kind of busy slide, but what a typical buyer persona might look like. So you want to think about your buyer's motivation. What is her primary focus? What are the challenges that she's facing? What is motivating her to seek a change rather than sticking with the status quo? You want to think about her buyer's journey. You want to think about who else is involved with her as she's moving through the buying process. What are the resources that she turns to? Does she go to review websites? Does she read industry publications? Does she turn to vendor resource galleries? Ding ding, we should create some content for her. And then what are the objections and decision making that she goes through as she goes through that process? What are her perceived barriers to change? You can find out all of this information in advance, so you plan it and have this information published so your whole company knows about it. There are a couple different ways to build personas and to approach the idea of what a persona is. The job info section that I included just has company size and industry and team size and roles. There are some people that dig a little bit deeper into the demographics side of a buyer persona. They're like, Miranda, she's between the ages of 30 and 55, and she shops at Dan Taylor, and there's a very detailed level of demographic data that some people bring into their personas. But you want to make sure you don't get bogged down there. A persona that shops at Dan Taylor is perhaps motivated by the same set of criteria as a prospect that shops at J. Crew. Like, you don't have to be that detailed. So that's what a persona might look like. Don't need to think too carefully about this, which might look overwhelming. I wanted to walk you guys through the 5 steps to actually build a persona. So what you should start with, and then how you bring personas into all of your marketing. So you want to make sure that you do some initial brainstorming. There's a lot of directions that you can go with the personas that align to your business. So make sure you do some internal brainstorming and interviews to just kind of build a base sketch. And then that second step, write out those rough sketches. At that point, you want to move forward with customer interviews and validation, really deep dives with customers to make sure that the assumptions that you're making in the first couple steps are actually borne out by the people that you want to reach. And you really, really want to document. So I don't know what types of organizations you guys work for, but if you're like the only marketer in your organization, you might be tempted to say, okay, I build my persona, this is for me, and like I'm going to use this, and it's going to be super helpful for me. But a persona is most effective when the whole company is using it and is aligned on why it matters. So that's persona documentation and sharing. And then the fifth step is kind of a sneaky step. You actually have to test, review, and revise your personas to make sure that they're still relevant. A lot of people create personas once and then years later they're using the same persona, but as we know, the world changes really fast. So you have to make sure you're revising. All right, so what does that initial brainstorm actually look like? Just use your internal resources. So talk to your sales team, talk to your customer success team. These folks are talking to customers every day. So you can just go over and chat with them. You can look into your Google Analytics. There's a great article on the Buffer blog. I don't know how many of you guys read that publication, but it's a great one about building buyer personas, and they have a screenshot of, you can actually see in Google Analytics some of the different interest categories of the actual visitors to your website if you have everything set up properly on the back end. And you can look into your contacts database. You can do a little bit of data analysis and see if there are people with certain titles or certain industries or certain company sizes that tend to be purchasing your product. You want to make sure you're targeting the people that are buying and that are successful with your product. And these interviews, the internal interviews, are also a really good way to do what's called a negative persona, which is a persona that you do not want to target. So that's somebody who maybe is not an easy sale. They're going to make it really difficult for the sales team to actually get the deal over the line, and then maybe once they're a customer, they're going to churn more quickly. So these are really important for that purpose. So what you're looking for in these interviews is typical decision maker, typical end user. Those are not always the same. How many people are actually involved in the buying decision? There's some stat out there that there's like 7 people on average involved in a typical B2B technology purchasing process. So there's going to be a lot of people involved, and you want to make sure that you build personas in line with the buying committee as well. Where do the roadblocks come up? So at what point, as a buyer is engaging with your company, do they fall off? Do they get confused? Do they need more information? What are they? And then what's the information that they're looking for that you can provide? And then really important here is one that I hope a lot of you are thinking about already, which is what actually is the problem that your product or service is solving. So I work for SnapApp. We're an interactive content creation platform. The problem that we solve is not, I need to buy an interactive content platform. The problem that we solve is much higher level than that. It's a lot of our customers are looking for ways to engage with their audience and generate more leads. Their boss is breathing down their neck to generate more leads every month. So we create a lot of content around lead conversion and engagement. So your problem that you solve is going to be different for the different buyer personas that you target, but it should also be aligned to all the content that you're creating. All right, so key here is to avoid assumptions. Like, you are going to naturally make some assumptions about your perfect buyer, and maybe you think that they're just like you or whatever. It's hard for me because I'm a marketer, marketing technology to marketers. Like, it's very, very difficult. But you can also trust your institutional knowledge. Like I said, the salespeople and the customer success folks are talking to customers all day, people that buy, people that don't buy, so you can trust the insights that they bring. All right, so then how do you actually create those rough sketches? Really, literally could just be as simple as this. You just want to give yourself a skeleton to add on to when you do the deeper dive customer interviews. So you want to think about how many personas do we think we have? When we did our initial persona research at SnapApp, I think we had a list of like 8 or 9 or 10 different potential personas, and that's just too many. It's just too many to manage effectively as a marketing organization. So I think we narrowed it down to 2 core personas and then 4 that come in at different stages, because there are going to be people that you don't meet until the buying, like the transaction. So think about how many personas you need. Are there different levels? Are there different personas per type of company that you deal with? Maybe you sell to mid-sized companies and enterprise companies. Those are going to be different buying experiences. So just lay out like the really rough outlines of the types of people that you want to talk to, because that can then inform who you're going to interview. So this is really the most important part, and like paradoxically, the most important, the most fun, and the most overlooked. So I love talking to customers. I love talking to people that might use our product, other marketers. It's so fascinating, and just hearing about people's day-to-day work, what they're struggling with, what's going well. But a lot of marketers skip this step when they're creating a persona because it's hard and it takes time. But it's the only way to build a really powerful persona that's, and a persona based on guesses and based on totally on assumptions is weaker than a persona that can bring in real quotes from a customer that you spoke to, or like the actual language, and get deep into the questions you should ask are like why questions. So getting deep into the emotional connections with the problem that you're solving. So if someone says, oh, you know, I just love using your product because it's, you know, maybe you're an email managing software, and you're like, oh, I just, every day, first thing in the morning, I come in and I check my email, and your product makes it so easy for me to come in and check my email. And you're like, okay, well, why is that important to you? Why do you care about being able to easily check your email? And you just dig until they're like, oh, well, you know, I'm just so stressed that I can't even face my day because I have to get the emails out of the way, and then later I'll deal with the stressful stuff of my day. So getting 4 or 5 questions into the why chain, I guess people have called it, gets you to the emotional resonance piece that you can pull into your personas and pull into your marketing. But you also want to ask like practical and logistical questions, like what publications do you read? Where do you go for information? Like, do you read review sites, or do you read industry publications to get answers to your questions? How do you get to work? Do you drive? Do you take the bus? Like all of these little pieces of their life that you can fold into the marketing that will resonate. And then it's really important to think about how you should follow up with these people. You can meet with customers for 10, 15 minutes at a time. It's better if you can invest more time with them, but that's more time on your side and more time on their side. So make sure that you're following up with a lot of gratitude and thank you gifts and, you know, reciprocation wherever possible. You want to keep building those positive relationships. So once you've done the interviews, got all your personas figured out, you really have to, you know, write them down. You have to document and share them, not just within the marketing team, not just to your sales team, and not just in a PDF. So you should create it in such a format that is easily revisable, easily shareable. A Google Doc is a great way, but you know there are a lot of different ways. I love this example. Hardot is a marketing automation provider. They actually created these like amazing cardboard cutouts of their personas, and they have, you know, sticky notes with quotes and the different, I guess, maybe geographical areas that you would find this persona. It's like a wild animal. And so they, you know, this is one way to really make your persona feel like someone who lives in your company. Like the persona should feel like a part of your company because it's driving everything that you do. Syntel is a company based in Boston. They're a cloud-based persona management software. So if you're looking for a way, you know, to manage your personas and share them and update them more easily, Syntel is a great way to do it. Syntel has done some research into this. They found, this is a weird quote, but I'll explain it. So only 8.2% of the people that Syntel surveyed felt that at least 75% of their organization could name their personas. So basically what this is saying is 91% of people think the rest of the organization has no idea about our personas. No one else in the organization knows the work that we've done, the hard work and the research that we put in to identify these people that should care about our product and that we should also care about. So this type of documentation process and the sharing process is really important to make it this institutional knowledge and not just something run by one person in marketing. All right, so then we have to test it, we have to review it, we have to revise it. So earlier this year, I went on my honeymoon. We went to the Louvre and we saw these amazing statues. This marble statue, I think it's Athena, and it was just, it was just the greatest. It was amazing, an amazing gallery. So it might be tempting to think about your personas as this like beautiful, goddess who is guiding everything that we do, but no, personas are not carved from marble. Personas need to be regularly updated. You should schedule something. Every 6 months would be like the longest I would go, probably without updating them, but regularly, monthly, if that feels good to you. But even if you're not, putting those meetings on the calendar, make sure you're staying curious about the state of your customers, questioning, talking to your customers. Marketing can become a little bit of an echo chamber, like we're just doing our stuff, like heads down, trying to get everything done, and we're not spending enough time talking to customers. So keep listening. If you're a social media marketer, get out there on social media and see what questions people are asking. There are ways to continue to engage the persona conversation after the persona development process is complete. Another Centel stat, I'm not trying to sell Centel, but they've done some great research. So they found that companies that exceed lead and revenue goals are 7.4 times more likely to have updated their personas in the last 6 months. So yeah, maybe the causality is debatable, but the important thing is that you're updating your personas. This research found that people are more successful if they're doing so, or that the people that are doing so are more effective. Safe to say, keep them updated. Okay, so that's how you build personas. How do we actually use them in our marketing? This is a chart. It might be a little hard to see. Oh, okay. That we use at Snap App to try to identify kind of the gaps in our persona matrix. So you'll see along the left side, those are different potential personas that a company might have. Across the top are different stages of the buying process. And then you'll see kind of dotted in between the different types of content that we've produced, or this fictional company has produced that meet that prospect's need at each stage. So you can see the first persona, Barbara buyer, she's all set. She has an interactive infographic at stage 2, ROI tool at stage 4, but stage 1 and 3, she might be a little bit lost. So that can help guide your content strategy, make sure that you're developing more stage 1 content and stage 3 content for Barbara. Or, look down and see there's an ebook, dedicated to Christie C-level. Maybe that could be repurposed up to Barbara buyers. So this is a helpful way to think about the relationship that our content should have to our personas and to the different stages of the buying process. This is an example of a Boston-based company, Insight Squared, and this is part of their homepage. So Insight Squared does sales data analysis, like business intelligence software, and they have it, their personas are very clear right on their website. Answers for executives, ditch your static reporting for sales leaders, provide clear answers for sales operations. So you can actually click into one of these. If you click into sales leaders, you have messaging that's directed right to the sales leader persona, additional content that is designed to meet that persona's needs. So this is a great case study of someone had a very clear idea of their persona and what it was, what that persona is looking for. Let's put it right on our website in a place that's easy for them to find. This is HubSpot. I'm assuming most people in the audience have heard of HubSpot and perhaps been to the HubSpot resource library. There are thousands of assets in their resource library. I am amazed. This is one tiny little subset, but you can see they have blogging for business marketing, an introduction to blogging for nonprofits, the little book of inbound for finance marketers, the ultimate inbound marketing kit for startups. So these are specific content assets that have been designed toward a certain persona and a certain audience. So business marketing, blogging for nonprofits, finance marketers, these people can come in and say, oh, I'm a nonprofit marketer. I need the introduction to blogging. Like, thank you. That was exactly what I was looking for. So I'm making it easy for people to read the content that we've tried so hard to create for them. So that was a pretty quick overview of a lot of things about personas. There's so much more to know. Personas is I was like coming into this topic, I was like, oh sure, I'll talk about personas, and then I start putting the deck together, and I'm like, this talk is going to be like 2 hours. Like I can't go into every detail about personas, so I'm going to send this, I guess, to Brian, and he'll probably be able to get it out to everyone. But some great links here from a lot of the people that I mentioned throughout the presentation to learn more about personas and keep developing them for your organization. So happy to take your questions. In the back.
So with the personas, on our last app, we thought we knew how people would, I guess, use the app and get like the personas and all the rest of that. And then we realized once we actually had the cooking things that we didn't know anything about how they were actually going to use the app. So we started using like Adobe XD to prototype, like doing like a 6-hour prototype and then re-asking people the question. Are a lot of people using like prototyping software or whatever to figure that type of thing to work with personas? So we just had a hard time. We thought we knew how people would use it until we actually did it, and we realized we didn't know if they could use it at all.
Yeah, I think that there's 2 different sort of types of personas. There's the buyer persona, like marketing persona, and then there's a user persona that is talked about more often in UX design and UI design. And there is some overlap usually. Like I think the Snap App product team has a certain number of user personas that they plan for and they design the product for. The marketing personas are sometimes different. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are people that are using them in a related fashion. For the marketing personas, I think it would depend on if you think that the messaging would change based on how they're actually, like what they're actually doing inside the product, which it may. But I haven't seen people do that, but it could be a really good way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, because we were just taking Adobe XD, remaking the whole thing in about 6 hours, handing it back to people and asking them questions over and over and over again. Like,
cool.
Click on it in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But when we first tried it, we thought we knew everything about our, and we just realized that we built an app that no one could use.
Great. Yeah, those assumptions are killer.
I work on this book right now for my company, and I'm in like the early sketch phase, internal interviews, and I think that people are getting a little bit too hung up on personas being driven by the job title, because not every job title is going to be the same buyer personality.
Right.
And so I'm thinking about approaching it from more of a personality standpoint, like those 7 different types. Have you seen people be successful building personas based on that, and maybe some tips on how to deal with that?
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen the persona, the personality type, particularly in the sales process. So a lot of salespeople will be trained, that there are these different buyers that you talk to. I think for marketing personas or buyer personas, what I've seen is people sort of dive really deeply into the motivations and the primary priority initiatives, I guess you would call it, which could be the same across multiple personality types, but that might be a way to access the challenge with the different titles. Because you're right, there's somebody who's a certain title. The title doesn't tell you much about the type of person that they are and the type of marketing that they want. If they're a marketing manager, they might be super analytical and want the numbers. They might be much more emotional and want the stories. So I think honing in on those priority initiatives will help you identify, okay, marketing managers with priority initiative Y are going to be called Chris, and then they're not marketing managers anymore, they're just Chris, and Chris is your persona. But it's tough for sure. Yeah.
How many variations or differences before you consider it a separate persona?
I think back to the priority initiatives thing, I think that's the key difference, is really what is going to motivate this person to change? What is this person really driving at? So if you're able to identify that the different priority initiatives that would drive someone potentially just discover your solution, that's a great way to do it. Otherwise, I think that if there are smaller differences, like different titles or different levels in an organization, as long as they're still working toward the same overarching challenge or the same goal, then I think they can remain the same persona. Does that help?
Yeah, a little. With programmatic buying, we're able to develop just gobs and gobs of different personas, and there's small differences between them. And I'm having internal debates with my team on Well, no, that's the same persona. There's only a couple variables that are different. But when we're buying it, it's just shooting it off into a whole different direction.
Interesting. Yeah, so interesting. I wonder if you would be able to pinpoint on how you're using the personas side of it, where it's most effective. So if you're able to identify a buyer persona that is like struggling at a certain inflection point or decision-making point, then you can look at, okay, this person hit this landing page and we thought they were the same persona, but they are totally not interested. Like half of the people are not at all interested in the landing page we thought was designed for this persona. Like maybe kind of backing into it a little bit in terms of like the content that they're engaging with and that they're what's working, I guess. Maybe that sounds like a tough challenge.
Yeah, I'm interested in the fact that you said you should revisit your personas at least every 6 months. I find that kind of puzzling. It would indicate to me that you were ill-defining your personas to begin with. So what's impacting the continued revisit of the redefinition of those? And is there ever a point where you say, okay, we do have these subgroups identified sufficiently that we have our messaging, we have them defined, and their activities are proving that out? Because it would seem that the market wouldn't, I mean, trends come and go, but if you're selling into an enterprise, those types of activities are ingrained. I'm a startup in the B2B play, and I'm talking to buyers and marketers who haven't changed their narrative or their discussions with people in decades.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that to the point that if it's working, if it's not broke, don't break it kind of thing. I think that is probably accurate to the extent that it is healthy for a marketer to keep having those conversations, those types of interview conversations. It might be good just to make sure that the marketing that you're doing hasn't somehow veered away from the things that a buyer is talking about. But yeah, I think it will vary from organization to organization. I think the 6-month mark is mostly like market fluctuations or emotional changes. Like the way that buyers approach things probably in certain organizations won't change that much. But it's a good point. Do you have a question about that?
Good. My company is a B2B company, and we sell into a lot of other B2B companies, so there's a comfort level of roles and responsibilities that kind of understand them structurally. But we're also trying to sell into other companies who themselves are B2C companies. Do you have any advice for creating personas for that world in terms of different roles or different ways of making sure that we're not missing something? As we construct a couple of personas for a company that we're selling to as a B2B, but they themselves are a B2C company.
Sure, yeah. I think that we do the same thing. SnapApp is B2B as well as B2B2C.
Yeah, right, B2B2C, yeah.
And I would say, just continue to have those interviews and see if there are differences in the way that those marketers are expressing their challenges. I think we tended to lump our personas together. They were similar roles whether they were at a B2B or a B2C.
Okay.
The biggest differences we saw were more like enterprise versus SMB. Like if you're in a smaller organization, you just have a lot of different challenges than if you are in a much larger organization. So those were the biggest changes that I saw in businesses.
The matrix was really helpful in understanding how marketing personas kind of apply along the continuum.
Great.
I'm on the agency side. So you're somewhere invested in user personas.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if you have any point of view on how best to get content creators to understand how they can better apply user personas. Most often I'm seeing these decks that come from our companies, they have the personas sometimes represented, but there's kind of like it's part of the, massive information.
Yeah.
I find it like ill used, not really effectively applied in the context of content creation. Just like best practices are just work with any people who have really done it in a strong way.
Yeah, I think giving people really powerful examples, like this is the website that Insights referred me that is directly connected to this exact persona. You can just use the words that the persona uses. So giving strong examples. I would say, it sounds like it might just be lip service and not actually fully ingrained in how they think about the challenge. I guess the the best argument for an effective persona is sort of what you were saying, that if they're working, then they're good. So content marketers and content creators want their content to be effective most of the time, I would hope. So if you're able to paint the picture of our most successful piece of content was geared very tightly to this persona, and we were able to identify that and it's working, I think that would be motivating to a content creator, hopefully, but that's what I would do. Any other questions, Brian?
I've heard companies put up literal posters of their personas on the wall. Have you seen any strategies of like that to keep it top of mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely encourage doing that. People get a little bit hung up on like what our persona looks like and like that kind of thing. It's a double-edged sword because you do want to be able to feel that empathy and feel like they're a real person and a real part of your company, but you don't want to have to worry about if they're a guy or a girl. Like there's not necessarily going to be a different persona. To your point about the granular, really tiny differences between personas, maybe two marketing managers, a man and a woman, have different buying motivations, but it's not because they're a man or a woman, probably. Like it's probably based on their buying style and that kind of thing. So yeah, I would definitely encourage it. It's a good way to get people to remember that it exists, like get it ingrained in the culture of the company. I think Airbnb had a really good story about when they did, I think they did user journeys, maybe not buyer personas, but they had an incredible illustrator come in and like make these beautiful murals of the journey, and actually thinking through like, oh, a buyer, for Airbnb is someone looking for a hotel, and like the first picture of them is like, oh, they're like daydreaming about going to Morocco, and like, so that's a really cool way to do it.
Yeah, I'm just curious if you have any experience like working with a product or UX team that has like user personas and using their work to sort of guide the effort of marketing personas. And so there's any overlap in that process of like defining those personas.
Yeah, so we did some of that at SnapApp, and we pretty much found that they lined up. There were a couple of the product team was much more focused on the end user, which makes sense, user personas. Which for SnapApp is a little bit different because the person that buys SnapApp is usually not the end user. We do want to make sure that we're incorporating them into our marketing because they're an influencer and they're going to need to be engaged at the customer level at least. So for that we had a UX consultant come in at one point, and we had like these big all-team meetings about the buyer journey and the user journey, and it was right around it happened to be right around the time that we were doing buyer persona research for marketing anyway, so it kind of overlapped nicely. So we just, at the time, were really small teams, so we just kind of collaborated with everyone and overlapped the research.
Okay.
Sure.
How do the personas relate to like customer lifecycle models? Like when I was hearing you talk, it sounds kind of like they're primarily intended to be used for like customer acquisition, but when you're talking about Airbnb, it sounds like it covered like acquisition, like engagement, retention, like the whole canvas. I'm just curious on like, do you tend to see personas used for like just acquisition, or do you think like taking time to develop a persona that stretches through like engagement and retention is like a worthwhile exercise?
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I think that the tendency is for buyer personas to be, originated from the marketing team, and marketing like we're laser focused in a lot of organizations on acquisition, and at the same time, getting it ingrained throughout the whole organization would require making sure that the customer success team and the sales team and everyone is thinking on those lines as well. So I think that aligning it to the customer life cycle is absolutely perfect.
So you showed an example of a website it looked like that had the different users from that point of view. Yeah, that one. So have you seen other effective ways to do that? Because a lot of times I'm curious, I'm building a website for my company and I'm trying to figure out
will use personalization tools and cookies to capture information about the company that's coming to them, and then create a website, a homepage experience that is unique to that company and that person's buyer persona if they've been cookied through like all these different systems. So that is a really cool way to do it. It is definitely the like fine line between creepy and like, helpful, because you do want to be helpful. You do want to be like, oh, I know that you want this resource right now, exactly, because I can tell that you're at this stage in the buyer's journey. But you also want to give people their space and their privacy. So that's one way to do it. There's also, at SnapApp, we use a company called Uberflip to manage our resource gallery. And their website has their resource gallery organized by role. So they have like resources for marketing managers, resources for whoever else their personas are. They also have the resources organized by marketing automation platform, because that's one of the ways that they segment their audience. So organizing your resource gallery in ways that will attract people to the resources that you have identified are good for them is another way to do it. How else have I seen people do it? I think this way of like people might be a little bit hesitant to maybe like admit that their content is going to be segmented, like admit that it's not for everyone or something. But this approach of like, I don't want to waste your time, I want to guide you to the resources you're looking for. If you're an executive, click here. Like, it's a reasonable way to do it. Sure. Hey, yeah.
Have you used any tools like surveys in order to help what?
Yeah, absolutely. So surveys are great, especially for that like initial, like the sketching time, sketching resource time. It can also give you some really nice insights if you are trying to reach a broader like group of your customers and you're having a hard time getting them on the phone. Survey is a great way to do it. It really, like, there's nothing to replace talking to someone on the phone or in person. Like, you hear the emotion in their voice, you hear where they're really struggling, you can like keep bugging them on a point that they won't give up, all of that kind of stuff that gets at the important kind of nuggets of insight. And then interactive content, one of the ways that we use it at SnapApp is something that I didn't touch on in this presentation, which is data management and how you actually assign personas to the contacts in your database. So you can use your database to nurture and segment people, but only if the data is in there. So if you have a list of personas, this is something we are 2 years later still digging through our database trying to assign all the right personas. Interactive content, if you create an assessment or a survey that asks the right questions, you can automatically bucket that lead into the right segment. So that's another great way to use surveys, is sort of that data capture piece. Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
So you kind of mentioned how our personas fit into a overall content strategy. I'm just wondering where you would prioritize, like if you're kind of starting from scratch and building a content strategy, like since like this informs a lot of other processes, like where would you prioritize that over like branding initiatives, a content audit? Where would you fit into that process?
I would say, personas should probably be part of the branding process. If you have the luxury of defining a brand at the same time, that's awesome. I would do that as part of the branding process, and then I would do the content audit once you have the personas in place, because you can do the audit like most organizations build personas or do a content audit, and then they build personas, and then they're like, oh, now I have to do an audit against which of our content applies to which persona. So you're kind of doing it twice. So that's the order that